Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer in that order. Welcome everyone, round 3 here of favorite cards in your PC from around the hobby. And this will be the final of the 3 videos. I got over 100 submissions for this, so thank you everyone for all the submissions. Only going to make 3 videos, so a lot of great ones not going to get to use, but really appreciate it. And let's check out this last installment here. This was sent in by Bruce, who wrote, growing up in the late 60s and early 70s, we did not have EA Sports or games like NHL Franchise on PlayStation or Xbox, so I made up my own games. I used my hockey cards, a marble, and 2 goal nets made from cardboard to play the games. On my hands and knees, 6 cards per side, I alternated with a card in each hand, and only my imagination to create these epic mini-games. I had full statistics sheet and followed an NHL schedule. I also had a subscription for the Hockey News with full team rosters, and I had compulsive need to create full 20-man squads per game. Any double or triple cards that I had quickly became players of cards that I did not have. I like to joke that my Gretzky card is the card that never was but should have been an Edmonton Oilers Future Star Centers card and Mark Messier's True Rookie. During the last month, I've been using some of these cards to create a new product called Card Commandments. I've only had the webpage and eBay store up for a few weeks now, but people seem really interested in the cards and prints I've created. I've been a collector my whole life, but stepped away in my early 20s after going through some of my old cards and realizing what a big mistake I had made there. I'm excited about the Card Commandments project. I think it'll be really good for the hobby and help people who may have felt like me and hopefully help create a market for underappreciated sports cards. This one was sent in by Britt, who wrote, I'm a lifelong Seattle Mariners fan. I've experienced the ups and downs of being part of this team's passionate community, but no matter what, I've always found solace in my collection of Mariners cards, each one a reminder of the moments of triumph and heartbreak that comes with being a true fan. Growing up as a boy with the name Britt, I always got mistaken for Brett, and with that I realized that my favorite team had a player with that name, so from then on I always gravitated towards him. And Brett Boone, what can I say about him? He's not just an incredible player, but a true icon of the Mariners franchise. With his signature style and incredible talent on the field, he also captured the hearts of fans everywhere, and his cards have become some of my most cherished in my collection. Being a child of the 2000s, there were so many amazing sets that I loved to collect, but none more than the Upper Deck Power-Up. The photos of the players with big heads always made me laugh, and I was always after the elusive Brett Boone. As always, I'm trying to buy as many Brett Boone autos and memorabilia cards as I can, and this card popped up. My favorite all-time set, my favorite all-time player, and it was signed. I think I paid less than $3 shipped, but I was over the moon. I have many cards that are worth more, but none that will top this weird big-headed card. Brett Boone might not be an all-time great, but he was and still is to a kid from the Seattle area who always wanted to play just like him. This was sent in by Greg, who wrote, I started collecting baseball cards in 1972 as a 7-year-old. I grew up in the Detroit area, and 1972 was a good year for the Tigers as they won the AL East by half a game. I recall my elementary school principal allowing my 2nd grade teacher to bring a black and white TV to school so that the class could watch the playoff game against the Oakland A's, which were all day games back then. Sadly, the Tigers lost in 5 games. But you would think my most meaningful card would be a Tiger like Al Kaline, Mickey Lalich, or Willie Horton, but you'd be wrong. While I love those guys and still am a diehard Tigers fan to this day, perhaps the most meaningful and certainly the most sentimental card in my collection is the 1972 Topps Willie Mays. And the reason really has nothing to do with Willie Mays for the most part, as I had no idea who he was and how great a player he was since I was just 7 years old, and this was the years before ESPN SportsCenter or the internet. The reason I was so enthralled by the card was when you turned it over, it was virtually all stats. Line after line of the season stats, including a lot of home runs. I always loved the season stats laid out like that, and in 1972, Willie Mays was the king of stats. This is the actual card that I pulled from a pack, and maybe the only one that I specifically remember from 1972. I looked at this card all the time until I wore out the bottom right corner and also creased the top right corner. Somehow it remained in my collection throughout the years, despite me upgrading many of my cards from 1972 when I finally finished the set in the mid-80s. This Mays card will always remind me of my first foray into baseball card collecting, which ultimately led to me becoming a full-time baseball card dealer for about 15 years from the late 80s to the early 2000s. I'm not a dealer anymore, but I still love all my old Topps cards from when I was a kid, and the 1972 set is still my all-time favorite design. This was sent in by Jeremy, who wrote, I'm now in my late 30s and back in the hobby for the long haul with a different perspective of buying up PSA cards, Hall of Fame registered, set registry cards, have much more of a refined quality over quantity approach. So as I embarked on this, I consolidated and sold off my bulk over the last couple of years. However, there are a few cards of my childhood PC which I could not part with due to sentimental reasons. One is a 1995 Donruss Elite die cut out of 10,000 of none other than the kid, Ken Griffey Jr. I don't have to explain to you or your audience the impact he had on the era of this hobby, and still to this day among generations of collectors. This card has a very special meaning to me due to the impact of the hobby at the time and the manner of which it was acquired. My dad and I actually pulled this from a pack in 1995 Donruss at our local card shop. Of course, during the era, there was no autographs or relics, so finding a serial numbered die-cut Ken Griffey Jr. insert was an absolute gold mine. I know this card is a little off center and has some obvious surface damage to it, but I will never part with it because of this memory in which it is tied to my father and I pulling this card. And we have another 1990s serial numbered Ken Griffey Jr. story. This one was sent by David, who wrote, I started collecting when I was 7 in 1996. My dad collected when he was a kid but didn't retain his cards, so he was excited to get back into the hobby. At some point, he bought me some 1996 donruss packs. I pulled a long ball leaders Ken Griffey Jr. insert numbered out of 5,000. We were both super excited. It was the best possible card to pull out of those packs, and probably today still is the most valuable ungraded card you can pull. I didn't know much at the age, but I knew Ken Griffey Jr. was a top player in baseball. It is a beautiful looking card and is serial numbered. I've kept it this whole time. I bought one more I saw at a show for under $20, and if I see any more under that price, I will buy more of them. I don't necessarily have a favorite player, but Ken Griffey Jr. is of course an all-time talent and a genuinely good person off the field, which helps retain some of the magic that comes with holding onto this card. I have a lot of nostalgia for mid to late 1990s baseball inserts, and it all started with pulling this card out of a pack in 1996. This was sent by Shang, who wrote, this is my favorite card, a Jordan Burroughs USA auto card. I love collecting cards and I love wrestling in high school. I made it to state and our team won state champs for wrestling, so it was my sport. I like collecting the Michael Jordan of cards, and I felt like a lot of people don't know about wrestling or that they even make cards, but I do like wrestlers and they don't get enough appreciation for their sport or what they do. After Jordan Burroughs won his 7th gold medal at the Olympics and Worlds, I believe that he is the best freestyle wrestler ever and is the Michael Jordan of wrestling. I knew I had to see if they made cards of this guy, and when I saw this one, I knew I had to have it, and I went on eBay and then sent it to SGC. It came back a 10-10, and I will never get rid of this card because he is my American GOAT. This was sent by Matt, who wrote, I was 12 years old in 1978 when cutting grass in the neighborhood through the summer months to help fund my new hobby of card collecting. After getting paid on Friday, I would hop on my bike and ride down to the country store and purchase as many packs of 1978 Topps baseball as I could. Over the summer, I got to know the elderly lady who owned the store. One time, she told me about her nephew who had recently passed away and left behind a card collection. She asked if I'd be interested in having his cards, which I obviously agreed to. She said they'd bring him to the store next Friday. Growing up in Minnesota, I was an avid Twins fan, so I was anxious to see how many Rod Carew cards I would find. Any Twins cards would be a huge bonus for me. The next Friday eventually came, and I hopped on my bike and headed to the store, bringing a backpack with me so I could carry the cards back home. As I entered the store, she looked at me and laughed. She said I'd probably need to call my mom for some assistance. Reached behind the counter and proceeded to pull out 7 shoeboxes full of cards from the 50s and 60s. I was stunned. With some help from my mom and our 1968 Buick station wagon, we were able to get these cards safely back to our house, and I spent the next several days sorting through my newfound treasures. Actually, I remember being somewhat disappointed by the lack of Twins cards, and there were no Rod Carew cards whatsoever, but I do remember one card quite vividly, the 1957 Topps #1 Ted Williams. This was my dad's favorite player. When he grew up, it was a beautiful card, and it was the first card I placed into my newly purchased card binder. I loved everything about this card, Ted's pose, the background, and the back of the card with his yearly stats listed, including his time served in World War II from 1943 to 1945. A lot of time has passed since 1978. A lot of cards have come and gone from my collection, but I still have this Ted Williams card. A few years ago, I decided to send it to PSA, not so much for grading, but to have it encapsulated and preserved. The grade really doesn't matter, as this will be a PC card for life. This was sent by Kevin, who wrote, it took me all of 5 seconds to identify the exact card from my collection that means the most to me. Growing up poor in a trailer park for much of my card collecting childhood, I never had the means to have any of the star rookies from the era. Growing up in New York, of course, meant I was a Yankees fan, and then growing up in the 80s meant, of course, I was a Don Mattingly fan. Fast forward to a few years to summer 2022, my third go as a collector, except mostly hockey now. I was visiting the mecca that is Burbank Sports Cards in town, visiting a friend. I went in with a budget, but intentionally kept my options open. Hockey singles aren't their strong suit, but when perusing one of the showcases, I came across a small stack of raw 1984 Don Mattingly rookies. I grabbed the best condition in the stack for $50. I typically avoid buying raw online and saw this as an opportunity to get a Grail card I could inspect in person. In the late 80s, this card was absolutely untouchable to me. It was hard to find where I lived in upstate New York, and when I did come across one at a card shop, it cost almost as much as my entire collection to that point. When telling my friend about this later that day, I find myself getting choked up. It's silly to think of the memory of this card and of eventual acquisition that it brought some form of closure to an insecure chapter in my life 3 decades later. It brings me a lot of gratitude knowing that I'm in a better place now, personally and financially. It took a bit of time, but I finally got my Donnie baseball rookie. This was sent by Benjamin, who wrote, my favorite card is the 1976 Topps Walter Payton rookie. And I'm in no way a Bears fan, but this Payton card is my favorite because it's the card that got me started into collecting again. The story goes, when I was a junior in high school, I decided to whip out my old collection I had when I was about 10. I wanted to sell the collection for college money, and I started selling via Facebook Marketplace and Facebook card groups. My two older brothers also got out their childhood collections, and we consolidated into one large collection to sell as partners. We started moving some lots, and we really enjoyed selling. About a month later, we were running low on valuable cards, so my oldest brother said, hey, why don't we look for a collection to buy? I was very against it because I wanted to be done with cards, but we did and found a collection with the Walter Payton rookie in it. We decided to buy and trade for it. We went in as a team of three brothers and bought the whole collection for $150 and about 100 Hot Wheels or so in trade. The Walter Payton rookie was the star of the collection, and we ended up keeping it after a few failed attempts to sell it. The Payton card reignited my love for sports cards that I had when I was a wee lad. I've been doing cards ever since with my oldest brother. We are both now collector, investor, dealers in that order because of this Walter Payton card. This was sent by Philly Joe, who wrote, the attached card is a custom card created by Tanner the Cardman for me and us from 2016. It's a picture of me and my family from that year's Philly Fan Fest. I will never ever part with the card, and I will literally be buried with it. Hope everyone enjoys. This was sent by Walter, who wrote, truly my favorite card is the 1967 Topps Rookie Stars, Bobby Mercer. Mercer was the first player I was a fan of in 1967 as an 8-year-old kid growing up in New York City. I watched him play until he retired and then listened to him as an announcer for the Yankees. Here's the icing on the cake. I got to meet him at the 1996 Yankees homecoming dinner in a private VIP room. I asked Bobby to take a picture with me, and I clumsily tried a selfie with a regular camera. This was back in the day. Bobby insisted we do it right. He called over a staff person and asked him to take the shot with his good friend, me. I was 38 years old at the time, but I felt like an 8-year-old kid in 1967. Bobby was very cool and extremely friendly. This was sent by Dave, who wrote, growing up around Baltimore, the Orioles were a huge part of my life and passion I shared with my father from as far back as I can remember. I have distinct memories of humid summers, windows open, and John Miller or Joe Angel calling Orioles games from my dad's handheld radio. We owned televisions, but he was old school. I also recall a distinct set of VHS tapes chronicling the history of the Orioles franchise, including 6 World Series appearances and 3 championships from 1966 to 1983. I developed an illogical hatred of Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan, and Willie Stargell because of those tapes, but also deep reverence for all things Orioles, Boog Powell, Frank Robinson, Brooks Robinson, Eddie Murray, Jim Palmer, Dave McNally, Cal Ripken, and of course, Earl Weaver. I don't remember the details of the signed Brooks Robinson 1970 Topps card included here, but I do know this. It belonged to my dad, who passed away in 2015. It's from the run over by a truck division, but it's signed by frickin' Brooks Robinson, and most importantly, it's a comforting reminder of my dad, the Orioles, and a lot more that wouldn't fit into 3-page paragraph email here. This was sent by Uncle George, who wrote, if my house was burning down and the fireman said, okay, you can run back in and save one card, it would be my 1955 Topps Sandy Koufax rookie. I remember when I bought this card in November of 2018, I saw this card was going to be auctioned off at Kaufman Auctions in Sugar Creek, Ohio, right near Amish country. When I saw that, I got busy selling cards I no longer wanted or had interest in. I took $500 to the auction to set a limit that's what I would spend. Back then, this card was selling for about $500 to $600. The auction started 100, 200, then 300. Then things stalled, going once, going twice, and I was thinking I might get a steal. But then, of course, somebody bid 310, then 320. Then it was just me and one other person bidding on the card, 360, 370, 440. I bid 450 and waited, and going once, going twice, the other guy did not bid, and I won the card for $495 all in. It was funny, when I got home, I was really excited, and I showed my wife that I had won. She looked at it and said nonchalantly, I'm glad you won, but I just don't get it. But I'm happy if it makes you happy. This was sent by Dave, who wrote, Nolan Ryan is obviously a baseball icon, but growing up, he was also my dad's and my favorite player. My dad was on a mission to collect every Nolan Ryan card, and when I was 12 years old, he took me to an auction where he bought this 1968 rookie auto to complete his Ryan collection. At that moment, I thought my dad was the coolest person on the planet. Getting to hold this iconic card is something I'll never forget. Flash forward 30 years, my parents are downsizing their house to make room. They decide to gift the entire card collection to me. After being out of the hobby for 30 years, I began to research autographs and baseball cards and noticed that fakes from 30 years ago were quite common. So I decided to send this card to PSA to see what would happen. 6 months later, the autograph was confirmed, and some of those feelings from 30 years ago started to rush back. Someone could offer me 10x value for the card, and it would still never leave my PC. This was sent in by Matt Esper, who wrote, my favorite card is a cabinet card from 1894 of my great-uncle Charles Duke Esper. He was a left-handed pitcher who played pro ball from 1890 to 1898. He played for 5 different teams during his career, and most notably the Baltimore Oriole championship teams of 1894, 1895, and 1896. The 1894 Perkins cabinet card was given to my dad from my grandfather, then passed on to me. The card is not just a picture mounted on a cardboard. The picture is the cardboard. I've had dealers tell me it's authentic. I've only found 2 other cards from the other players known to exist. Kid Gleason card was on auction at Heritage Auctions and another card in a private collection. Super cool having some family history in the game I loved to play as a kid and still love to watch today. Needless to say, this card is staying in the family. Just as a side note, the running joke is that Charlie Duke Esper was teased by his teammates because he had trouble running the base paths. They say he ran like a lame horse, hence the name Charlie Horse stuck as someone who is having a leg cramp. But that's it. Thank you everyone for all the great submissions. I hope everyone enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it and reading them. And see you all again real soon. Thanks everyone.